Hi, I'm Erica, and I had absolutely everything I could dream of. Rich parents, a posh house, and popularity. So, I never tried to study hard, and I never prepared for final exams at school. Instead of cramming, I hung out with Chloe and Amanda at my favorite club. I was sure I would get good grades anyway, because my dad was the biggest sponsor of the school. But that wasn't what happened at all. The teachers bombarded me with questions, and I failed the exam. Mr. Collins even called Dad to the school, but that didn't bother me. Dad always solved my problems easily, and I had no doubt that he would put Mr. Collins in his place. But I couldn't have been more wrong. After coming back from school, Dad called me into his office. I ran into my brother on the stairs. Herman looked at me with pity for some reason.
I don't know what you did, but Dad is furious.
My confidence quickly evaporated. Did Dad really side with those nasty teachers? I walked into his office cautiously. Dad was sitting in an armchair and drumming his fingers on the table impatiently. I stopped at the door, and there was a moment of tension in the office.
Come here.
Dad spoke so suddenly that I flinched. I came closer, and I stopped in front of the table.
Look at you. You have nothing on your mind but parties and fancy clothes. Your mother and I worked hard to build a family business. Herman is the best student at his university. And what did you achieve?
I rolled my eyes. That's right. You and Mom made a huge fortune. Herman is going to take over the company after you retire. So why should I have to study? Thanks to you, I have everything I need. I shouldn't be wasting my time studying just so I can work somewhere for nothing. And those words were the final straw for my dad. He even got up from his chair and looked down at me angrily.
This won't do. You will be 18 in a week. During this time, I need you to think about what you want from life. Either you go to a university or you marry the son of one of my partners. It's up to you.
I couldn't believe my ears. What were we, living in the Middle Ages? But honestly, there would be no arguing with Dad, and I left his office, slamming the door on my way out. The next day, Chloe, Amanda, and I went to the spa. I relaxed and I almost calmed down. Dad had always had an explosive temper, but he loved me. And of course, he would never do that to me. I spent the week preparing for my birthday. I sent out invitations, arranged things with cooks and decorators. I wanted to outshine everyone, and I found myself a gorgeous dress. When my birthday finally came, a hairdresser and makeup artist came to me in the morning. I really liked my final look. I stared at myself in the mirror, and I couldn't wait to meet guests. As expected, though, everyone adored me. I listened to the compliments and I smiled sweetly. And then it was time for gifts. But before that, Dad got up from the table and went to the center of the room. He congratulated me and suddenly announced that his gift would depend on the decision I made.
You remember my conditions, don't you?
The guests all looked at us, intrigued, and whispered to each other. They obviously didn't understand what this was about, and I couldn't believe it was really happening. Dad hadn't been joking. Tears sprang up in my eyes. I didn't care anymore that everyone was looking at us. You can't make decisions like that for me. I'm an adult now, like you said. I'm gonna live the way I want to.
Well, since you're so grown up, make your own living. Tomorrow, you leave the house. You can take what you can carry. And by the way, forget about your credit card. It'll be blocked by then.
Silence fell. I was so shocked that I even opened my mouth to reply, but I couldn't think of anything. Mom tried to say something, but Dad just waved her away. The party was ruined. I burst out crying and I ran to my room. I couldn't help it at all and I threw a vase at the wall. If Dad thought I was scared, then he was wrong. I would do just fine without his money. And about an hour later, my mom came to my room, and then Herman. But I locked my door, and I didn't talk to anyone. The next morning, I'd packed all my stuff, and I left the house in which I'd spent all 18 years of my life. After walking out of the mansion's gate, I took one last look at our house, and I resolutely walked away. After wandering around the city for a while, I had to stop in a cafe. Then I called Chloe, and I asked her if she would let me crash at her place. Sorry, but my cousin moved here the other day. I don't think there'd be anywhere for you to sleep. It's kind of cramped, sorry. Well, that was weird. Chloe had never talked about any cousins before. After that, I called Amanda, but she didn't let me come over either. I started feeling a little uneasy, but I didn't despair. I had a lot of friends, so I started calling every one of them, one by one. But the more calls I made, the more disappointed I felt. No one wanted to help me. And it was only at that moment when I realized what kind of situation I was in. Because of Dad, I didn't even have a credit card. I had thought to take some cash with me, but the amount was ridiculously small. And the worst thing was, I suddenly realized I didn't have any friends. Everyone had only been hanging out with me for my money. And now, well, they didn't need me anymore. I didn't have much hope anymore, but I still called Vicky. She was a nerd, and we didn't talk much at school. I even made fun of her silly outfits pretty regularly. But to my surprise, Vicky heard me out, and she agreed to help. I joyfully rushed to her place. Vicky lived on the outskirts of the city in a small apartment with her parents, 2 brothers and 1 sister. Vicky's family had agreed to let me stay with them for a few days. Soon, I had to sell my jewelry and start looking for a place to rent. Unfortunately, though, I couldn't find anything that suited me. All of my savings weren't enough to rent a normal apartment. But then, it turned out that Vicky's friend was looking for a neighbor to split rent with. I didn't have any other options, so I agreed. Vicky's apartment turned out to be a paradise compared to the hellhole I had to move into. When I saw my new room, I almost burst into tears. There was no furniture, except for 1 bed and a crumbling chest of drawers. I spent the night tossing and turning on the hard mattress, making plans to get out of there as soon as possible. And the next day, I started looking for a job. I tried to get a job as a manager, a secretary, a seller in a cosmetics store, but I failed all the interviews. For the first time in my life, I felt like a loser. Having failed yet another interview, I was sitting in the kitchen and crying. All of a sudden, my new neighbor Mike came in and asked what was wrong. I couldn't help but spill everything.
No wonder you look like a princess, but you even save on food. I think I can help you. My boss is actually looking for a girl for an interesting job.
I felt pretty wary. What kind of job?
It would probably be better if you saw for yourself. Don't worry though, it's not weird. Everything's legal.
The next evening, Mike brought me to a bar. His boss, Ralph, was already waiting for us at a table. He turned out to be young and handsome. Before, I probably would have started flirting with him, but right now, I needed to act professionally. First, Ralph looked me up and down and gave Mike a thumbs up. I told you. Can you explain what's going on here? I thought I would be offered a position as a waitress or maybe a bartender, but Ralph surprised me.
I've been in the show business for a long time. I find dancers, entertainers, and circus performers for various events. I recently got a unusual order. I need a girl for a live shop window. She has to look and move like a Barbie and pose in the window of a collectible toys shop.
Are there really so few models who can dress up like dolls and stand in a live shop window? Ralph hesitated. He explained to me that the problem wasn't a lack of girls. It was that, according to the contract, the Barbie would have to live in the store, in a special dollhouse in front of the visitors. After closing hours, a broadcast of her life would be available for viewers in a special smartphone app. And so far, none of the models had agreed to such conditions. And really, of course they hadn't. Who would sign up for something like that? Seeing that I had obvious doubts, Mike tried to convince me. He said that it was the perfect option for me. If I agreed, I'd be saving on rent and earning money. And I asked for some time to think. The next morning, I was woken up by a call from an unknown number. When I answered, it turned out to be Ralph.
Erica, why are you late for dress fitting? We have a lot of things to get done today.
Huh? What dress fitting? I haven't even agreed to work yet. It turned out that Mike had called Ralph the previous night and had said that he'd convinced me to try. Ralph had paid him a large sum of money for that. I hung up and I went to find Mike and sort things out, but neither Mike nor his belongings were in the room. He had set me up. He'd just taken the money and left. I called Ralph back and I tried to explain the situation. I hoped that maybe he would put himself in my position, but Ralph got angry, gave me an ultimatum. Either I give him back the money that he gave Mike, or he would go to the police and put me on trial for fraud. I was left with no choice. Again, packing up quickly, I drove to the address that Ralph had given me. Preparatory work was in full swing in the store, and there was very little time left before the opening. Ralph immediately dragged me into the fitting room. and a team of stylists began to choose an outfit for me. At the same time, they put makeup on me, taught me to pose in the window, and how to look good in front of the camera. Then, we walked around the store, and they showed me my new home. Of course, it looked so much better than the hellhole I'd been living in with Mike. But I was nervous because here I'd be constantly watched. More than anything, I was afraid that someone I knew would recognize me. That would definitely make me a laughingstock. On opening day, a huge crowd gathered by the store. Besides the usual visitors, there were also paparazzi. Children and adults came up to me, and I took selfies with everyone. And after a long day of hard work, I was exhausted. I really wanted to sit down and just be left alone for a while. But Ralph came up and told me that after visitors left, a private event would begin. I had to attend it and entertain the guests there, too. I was so tired. But at the party, I had to smile and pretend like everything was fine. I picked up a cocktail along the way and was wandering among the guests when Ralph suddenly called to me. He said he wanted to introduce me to someone and brought me back to some guy. He was standing with his back toward me, so I couldn't see his face.
Meet Herman Lloyd.
The guy turned around and I felt my blood run cold. At that moment, I only prayed that my brother would not recognize me in the low light with makeup on.
Herman, this is our Barbie. Her name is
Evelyn! My name is Evelyn.
Ralph raised his eyebrows in surprise, but he played along. It's strange, but your face seems kind of familiar to me.
That's probably just because I look like the Barbie doll. It was too dangerous to stay this close to my brother. I pretended that I wanted to get another cocktail, and I moved to a different part of the hall. I was so afraid that Herman might have come with her father, so I tried my best not to catch anyone's eye. I wanted to slip into the back room and just wait there, but someone suddenly grabbed me by the elbow in the corridor and pulled me towards themselves. Turning around, I saw Herman. He pushed me hard against the wall.
Did you really think I wouldn't recognize you here, even looking like this? Erica, where have you been? Our parents were worried sick about you.
Worried sick? This is all Dad's fault. He's the reason I'm here in the first place. Go bother him if you want, but leave me alone. I'm not coming home. But Herman didn't listen to me. He told me to change and said we were leaving right away. I probably wouldn't have had the strength to resist, but Ralph suddenly intervened. He stood between me and my brother and reminded me about my contract. Herman got angry and told him to stay out of our family's business, and I quietly asked Ralph to take me away from there, and I promised I would return to the store in the morning. On the way, I told Ralph that Herman was my brother and I came from a rich family. My dad kicked me out of the house. I understand now that I was in the wrong, but I can't go back. I have to prove to him and to myself that I can achieve everything I want by myself and not thanks to their money. That got me a flash of respect in Ralph's eyes. When we arrived at the house, he kissed me on the cheek. The next morning, I moved into the store. Being Barbie wasn't exactly easy, though. During the day, I stood in the window and I entertained visitors. And in the evenings, I was bored and alone. One evening, though, Ralph visited me. He brought cakes and we ate them over a nice chat. Since then, he came by every evening, and I started really looking forward to those moments. It was during one of them when he kissed me, and it was absolutely fantastic. I had always had a lot of admirers, but I had never felt anything like this with any of them. One morning, I was standing in the window as usual. Suddenly, though, I noticed that the store was empty for some reason. I walked around and I noticed security guards asking customers to leave. I was just about to ask what was going on when my father walked in. When I saw him, I froze. He looked me up and down, displeased.
I bought this chain of stores and now you're free from your contract. We're going home, right now. You are going to marry my business partner's son.
And no one was interested in what I thought of that. My father's guards grabbed me, brought me out of the store, and shoved me into a car. I was seething with indignation, and I accused my father of being unfair. At home, he locked me in my room and said he would let me out after I'd stopped throwing a fit. But I couldn't calm down. I screamed, and I hit at the closed door. There's no way I'm marrying a stranger! I already love someone! The door suddenly opened, and I barely had the time to jump backward. My father was standing there with Ralph. When I saw Ralph, I felt confused, but also happy at the same time. Why was he there, though? Ralph asked my father to leave us alone. Then he suggested we sit down and told me that our fathers were business partners. When Ralph had turned 18, he'd realized that he wanted to devote his life to show business, not developing his father's business. So he left home and he started building his career without his dad's money. Ralph had thought that maybe his father would be proud of him, but he just pretended like he didn't have a son.
I don't want you to repeat my mistakes and leave your family. Erica, I know how we can fix everything and help our parents' business.
What happened next came as a complete surprise to me. Ralph suddenly got down on one knee and handed me a ring.
I love you, and I want you to be my wife. Will you marry me?
All thoughts in my head were gone, and I held out my hand to Ralph, trembling with excitement. I agreed. I would marry Ralph, but only after passing the university entrance exams. I was so terribly tired of being just a beautiful doll. I wanted to put some work in and achieve something with my brain. And Ralph did turn out to be right. Our engagement helped him reconcile with his father, and it strengthened our parents' business. What is your relationship with your parents like? Tell us in the comments down below.